We want to hear from a speaker who's been a real force in her neighborhood, one of the great neighborhoods of Cincinnati. She has a heart for the social change in the world and is an advocate for affordable housing. She's a proud member of that Evanston neighborhood. It's a great neighborhood in Cincinnati, and she's been actively involved in her community council for years. She serves on the executive board of that organization as well. Let's welcome Roxana Hawkins.
So, before this talk starts, there are 4 things that you need to know about me. The first is that I'm a social worker. No, I don't work for Child Protective Services, even though I have in the past. You know, I'm more of the Ida B. Wells, the Whitney Young type, the identifying a problem and solving it type. If you can't go over it, you got to go around it. And if we can't go around it, then we'll go under it. And if under is not an option, then I'll walk next to you as you go through it type. So the second thing you need to know is I'm an educator. Not that, well, officially I'm an assistant professor at Mount St. Joe, but not the kind of professor that just talks at you and you listen type, unless it's a TED Talk and, you know, this is just what I have to do. But I'm more one of those professors that's gonna nudge you to think about things differently. I'm going to challenge you to change your mind. I'm gonna come alongside of you as we start to stretch your brain into realizing there are solutions out there that you didn't even think were possible. The third thing you need to know is I'm a millennial. I'm the I drink out of metal straws to save the turtle type. I'm the work-life balance is important to me type. I'm the multitasking is my middle name type. I'm the I spend money at businesses that align with social missions that I agree with type. And number 4 is I believe that the individual has the power to make meaningful social change. So really, number 4 is just a summary of 1, 2, and 3. Are you still with me? Yes. So when I found out that I got selected to do this presentation, my mind went crazy. All the ways I could do this. Well, I could tell my story, I could tell the solution, then we could talk numbers. I could give the solution, then my story, then the numbers, but the educator in me won. So let's talk numbers. So like my friend Liz already told you about, in 2017, Liz put out an analysis here in Hamilton County that identified that we were 40,000 units short as it relates to affordable housing here in Hamilton County, okay? So let's really think about that. I like to think in pictures. So if you're here in Cincinnati, you probably know what Knepert Stadium is, right? So if 1 unit affordable housing equaled 1 seat in Knepert Stadium, we could fill the whole arena. Now, if you're from UK and you know Rupp Arena, we could almost fill that twice. Those are some pretty big numbers, guys. Like that's a huge shortage. So who exactly then is a part of this face of affordable housing issues? Well, a lot of times we like to think, well, maybe it's single parents, right? Or folks living in poverty, which, you know, that could be very true too. But it's not just the single mom. So there was a recent study, well not too recent, 2016 that was released, and it talked about individuals on disability who solely rely on SSI as their only form of income, that in 2016, there was no housing market in the United States that income would get them a safe or decent 1-bedroom apartment. 4.8 million Americans rely on SSI alone. So these are people who are disabled, physically, have some type of mental handicap, all of those different types of things. 4.8 million could not find an affordable unit on SSI income. All right, so that's a pretty big number. So let's bring this home. In Hamilton County in 2016, an individual relying on SSI alone would have to spend 84% of their income to get a 1-bedroom apartment. So that means that they would have roughly, and I'm no mathematician, 16% of their income to buy soap, to buy toilet paper, to buy lotion, to buy a notebook if that's what they wanted. 16%. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think that the numbers have gotten any better. And in Fayette County in Kentucky, 83% of their income would have to go to get a one-bedroom apartment. That's nowhere near affordable, right? So now we've talked about, maybe it's a single parent issue. Well, maybe it's individuals who are on disability. So who else, though? Who else could be a part of this? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's you. It's college students. The American Association of University and College this summer in 2019 released a report that said at two-year institution, 60% of students will at some point or another face a housing insecurity or homelessness. Four-year institutions, we're not doing much better. We're at 49%. That broke my heart. So wherever you are, in whatever room you're in or virtual site you're at, literally almost half of that room at some point or another won't know where they're gonna sleep, will worry about how they're gonna pay their rent or their mortgage. Man, that is completely astronomical. So when we think about the numbers, even here in Hamilton County, we've established that these numbers are huge. We've even kind of looked at, put it into something tangible that we could imagine, and then we've put a face on it. That's pretty tough. As a social worker, we deal with this stuff a lot, but I realize that these numbers are heavy, so we're gonna get solution focused, okay? So let's talk solution. What if I also told you that the solution was you? Now, I know someone somewhere, even though I can't see you, is like, who is this lady? She just literally said that half the people in this room will struggle with a housing insecurity of some type, and then she literally in the same breath just said that you're a part of the solution. Yeah, I did, I know. Here's the thing, is that you won't be a student forever despite what your brain tells you during finals. I promise one day you'll graduate. And so this is where you become a part of the solution. Now I know this is gonna be radical and it's okay, but just hang with me, okay? So what if I told you that if you, when it was your turn to buy a home, what if I asked you to buy an apartment building instead? Maybe a duplex, a triplex perhaps. What if I told you that you then had the option to rent out the units, maybe the ones you don't live in, maybe just one or two, at an affordable rate? Because you would control how much you set the rent at. Now I know you're like, Roxana, this doesn't make any sense. I get it, but just hang with me just a little bit, right? So let's talk about the University of Cincinnati. Last spring, they graduated roughly 6,900 students. The year before that, they graduated roughly 6,500 students. Now again, I told you I'm no mathematician, but I think we're roughly sitting about 13,000 students who graduated, rough math, okay? So if that's the case, if we could get each one to go, right, and get a duplex and offer the unit that they don't live in as affordable housing, well then it sounds like we at least started somewhere, right? And here's the thing, I know it sounds extreme and I know you're like, Roxana, I'm not really sure if this would work. And the only reason I throw it out there as an option is because I walk it like I talk it. My heart has always been for the urban core, Black communities, anyone who is marginalized or oppressed. But every day I tiptoed back out to the suburbs and I drove into my garage and I shut the door. But then at some point my heart started to stir because I knew we're in a crisis here. And so what I did was started to search. I started to search for apartment buildings. And before I knew it, my house sold and I had absolutely nowhere to live because I hadn't found this apartment building that I was gonna move into. So what did I do? I moved into an intentional community in Norwood with Owen and Sandy Brock, who have housed women inside their home for over 20 years. Even while raising their children, they had adult women living in their spare rooms. Now, I'm not talking a boarding house here. I'm talking about an intentional community where it's an affordable rate and you actually do life together. I was there for about 6 months before I got the opportunity to have my own set of apartments and then provide affordable housing in my own community. this idea really isn't radical at all. It really isn't. You see, at the Mount, I told you I work at Mount St. Joe University. There's this thing that we say, and it's posted on the wall, is risk a caring response. Now, I'm going to change this just a little bit, because sometimes what people think about as caring is, I'll vote against my own interests. I'll sign a petition while I'm in Kroger, or I get stopped in a parking lot, or I'll attend a meeting. No, what would happen if we risked an actively caring response, where we actually started to do something? You know, some people are going to say, well, Roxana, what about policy? And I'm completely on board. Like, macro level social workers, I'm here for you all day. Let's do it. But this is a both and, not one or the other. Now, if anybody's ever listened to John Mayer, he has a song that talks about waiting on the world to change, right? We just keep on waiting on the world to change. So while we're waiting on policy to change, while we continue to advocate on that front, the problem is just growing. What if we took an actively caring response while we were waiting? Now again, that's just a possibility. You know, I would have to say though, it's really the only thing that has ever changed anything. You know, I wonder if Malcolm X's and Martin Luther King's and Mother Teresa's and all of our activists, if they had waited to get active until policy changed, I guess we'd still be waiting, wouldn't we? So I'll leave you with this. What if? I know not everybody listening is going to run out and go buy a duplex. That's okay. But what if, instead of just thinking about it, what if, not just voting against our interests, what if we got actively involved? What if we risked an actively caring response when it came to housing insecurity? I bet it'd make an impact. Well, I guess we'll just keep on waiting, or won't we?